You don't have to own a digital camera long before you realize that the higher we make our ISO setting, the more noise we're likely to see in our images. In the practical world, the obvious advice anyone can give is to try to keep the ISO as low as possible. And if you have an automatic ISO setting on your camera, it may be a good idea to turn it off, at least for a while, until you get a feel for it. Work with it manually and you'll learn more about the capabilities of ISO on your particular camera. But one thing to remember is this. If you really need a faster shutter speed, and the only way to achieve that is by pushing up the ISO, then do it. For the simple reason that we can always do something about noise, but we can do precious little about an unsharp or blurred image. Now, while I've been speaking, I've increased the ISO up to 6400, and in some cameras it will go this high. The first step to minimizing noise is never to underexpose your image. If you have any dark areas of a picture that has been shot using high ISO, and you try to lift detail from the shadows in an image editor, you're going to make noise a lot worse. In fact, it's better if you can squeeze more light into your sensor, but of course there's always going to be a limit to this. Here I have a number of images shot with different ISO settings, and I'm going to use Photoshop to allow me to enlarge them all to the same degree, and we can take a closer look at the noise in relation to each ISO. As you can see, we start with 100, 200, 400, 800, and the maximum on my particular camera is 1600 ISO. A few moments ago I said that it's much better if we can squeeze as much light into the sensor as we possibly can, so that we don't drag up detail from dark areas and make noise worse. Well, there's a modern term for this. You'll often hear it referred to as exposing to the right. This allows us to manipulate the image from light tones to darker ones and not the other way round. So it's an important thing to consider when we get the image into our image editor. We always want to be trying to darken the image rather than lightening it if we've used a high ISO. So here I've increased the size of all of these images to 100%. Generally speaking, we're going to see noise more in smooth areas like skies rather than areas that contain detail. But as always, there's going to be limits. So here we're looking at 100 ISO, and I doubt we can see very much in the sky at all. There's just a little bit. I can see a little dust point there. Let's turn this one off and we'll look at the next one, which is 200 ISO. And we can now begin to just see a little bit of noise in that even tone sky. But do remember, I've got the image at 100% enlargement here. Let's move on to 400 ISO. And there we can see just a little more noise now creeping into the blue area of the sky, center middle. And if we move up still further, we should see it a bit more evident now at 800 ISO, and finally 1600 ISO. In addition to looking after our exposure when we're using high ISO, take a look at the luminance in the noise reduction sections of Camera Raw or Lightroom. They're very good at smoothing out the noise we can see here. If I leave the 1600 ISO image showing on screen, but I return it to its normal size, you can see that the noise isn't anywhere near as evident now. So we've got to make allowance for the fact that I did enlarge the image considerably. I think one final thing to say about ISO and noise is that there are some great advances in this area of our photography. There are some modern cameras out today which seem to be getting better and better at handling higher ISO settings, so a good exercise may be to check out your own camera. Just put your camera on a solid surface or on a tripod, take a series of shots of the same scene, one at each ISO setting, and then take a look at them on your computer one at a time, just to get a feel for how your camera handles ISO.